Cognizantability, Section 2, The Basic Laws of Transmutation. Introduction to Section 2. A very interesting question comes to all of us from time to time. That is, why are we what we are? Why do we react as we do? Etc. In the pages that follow, I elucidate the mind and give a few of the esoteric laws for the transmutation of the creative energy. It is very interesting to note that very little is known publicly and taught in schools regarding the transmutation of the sex force. Modern psychologists often speak of sublimation, which is, of course, a step in the right direction towards transmutation, which elucidates your so-called problems to you, and your subconscious understanding of those problems does the same for others. I would suggest that in reading the following laws of the mind, that you concentrate on only one at a time, until its meaning is made clear to you. This, as you may now think, will not be unduly difficult. In handling your study of cognizantability in this manner, you will have great pleasure in the conscious elucidation of your own mind, which will, of course, lead to the subconscious transmutation of your creative energy, thus unfolding latent supraconscious powers of which writers write, poets praise, and saints pray for. To give you an illustration of how your study will progress, I should like to give the finding of one of my students who found that concentration on any given thing for a length of time, as this prayer, calms the conscious mind, which is generally in a semi-confused state, when not entirely so. When this conscious state of mind is, to a certain extent, under your conscious control, and more so after you continue in this work, your subconscious mind, which never rests or sleeps, consciously takes hold of the situation concentrated upon, and with the aid of the supraconscious mind, works out the thing concentrated upon. This appears perhaps to be rather a complex state of affairs. I can only suggest this, that if you don't thoroughly grasp it the first time, read it again. If not, then read it a third time. And by that time, your superconscious mind will have had a chance to make the first reading of the data clear to your conscious mind. This sounds logical, doesn't it? You have only to try to find that it works. In these materialistic days of our modern civilization, it is quite necessary for the layman to understand the laws of the mind in order to cope with the fast-moving world about him. Of course, psychologically, we know that one of man's basic desires, whether he knows it or not, is to know himself. The story of the transmutation of the creative forces is likened unto the boiling water into steam to give a greater power. When we refer to transmutation, we do not mean to suppress, repress, or inhibit. It is a natural law in the unfoldment of the spiritual being of man, and should be understood as such. As man leaves his instinctive nature and unfolds spiritually, the forces of that nature must be brought under his conscious control. Much work in this direction is done under the guidance of the disciple's spiritual teacher, but the basic desire must be manifest in the disciple himself. The following laws gives a brief summary of the basic psychology behind the unfoldment of the inner being, namely the transmutation process. Sex plays an almost unduly time-consuming part in our lives today. It has been advertised, boasted about, displayed, and enjoyed throughout the world. This treatise brings a new angle to sex that is as old as time, yet comparatively new to this century. The transmutation of the creative forces given here is the key to youth, happiness, and creative living. Sex has become a problem to many, though a natural function in life. It plays a most important part in the unfoldment of one's inner nature to the realization of your real self. Let your mind begin to intuit the sound fundamentals of an expanding consciousness backed by the creative forces of life itself. The following aphorisms are the results of findings that have been lived rather than thought up. These are to be looked at intelligently, with an open mind, and to be put into practice as soon as understood. Taking into consideration the fact that this study is comparatively new, it has been advisable to tell in detail all about the mind and the body as it corresponds to the emotional and sexual nature. You will find your mind going along with these down-to-earth facts as you read this treatise. Looking into your own life, you will find that you and you alone are responsible for your shortcomings and your successes. You have no one to praise but yourself, and no one to blame, for all is your creation and your self-created universe. Everything you placed into action, you have reacted, enacted, and reaped results. Take, for example, how you lived when you were a child, how free you were. Then, as you started to mature, society suppressed you, and through a series of these suppressions, a repression was formed deep within the subconscious mind, and the body changed as a result. Following the repressions came desires that were completely unqualified. These desires shaped themselves into many forms. First, in the form of sexual urges. Second, in the form of indulgence that were not in the least related to sex, but relieved the emotional nature enough so as to ease the pain of the repressions that was beginning to burst loose. Sometimes it does break loose, creating havoc in one's life, but more often it remains tempered by enjoying releases through unrelated fields. Read the aphorisms with an open mind. Do not try to understand them. Agree or disagree with your findings until the second reading. Then your own nature will begin to give you clue as to how this wisdom relates to you, and you alone can apply it to your life, so that an abundance of creative power can be released within you through the transmutation of your own sex energies.